Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison. That's me. My co-host is Beverly Marshall Sailing, and our guest today is Rhias Hall. Now, you know that on this show, we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games. And this season, that game is Magic the Gathering. And our guest today definitely has some stories, some of which she can even tell in public, about the early days of what it was like to work on Magic the Gathering. Welcome to Fireside, Rhias.
Yay, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. I gotta say, Beverly and I have been very excited, looking forward to having you here because, well, there were so many stories from back in the Wizards days.
There's a lot of stories from back in the day that some of which can be told, others which we have buried in our subconscious, never to have them emerge again.
Yes, we could.
Personal safety, really.
Yeah, social
Yes.
safety. Yeah. So it's okay to tell, to just leave somebody's name out if that helps,
Oh.
right? Yeah. So, all right. So what we want to do is we want to start about you. I mean, this show is about you. This episode is about you, Rhias.
Everything's about me.
Oh, thank you. So let's start with before Magic. What were you doing before you started working at Wizards of the Coast? And we want to find out how you got there and what you were doing before.
Well, I had moved up from Southern Oregon. I was working for a company that did produced trade shows, basically.
Okay.
And
Trade shows, conventions.
conventions, new age conventions.
Okay.
Fun.
New age conventions.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So we would do things like
Yeah.
we would bring in like Timothy Leary as a guest speaker, or Deepak Chopra we brought in we had a lot of guest speakers, and then we would also have an exhibition hall.
Right.
So I was working for them when I moved up to Seattle. After a while, they decided to move to a different part of the country, and I didn't want to go.
And so this is probably around 1991, 92, along
It's
in
like
there. 'Cause
92, yeah.
I'm just saying that because that's about
Yeah.
close to when you got hired
And
at Wizards.
yeah, and then I ended up, because I joined the vampire live action role playing group, the Camarilla, which was just starting.
Oh, are you a goth, by the way?
No, what would make you think that?
No goths at Wizards.
I was a member of the Camarilla, where I met a lot of other people who also ended up working at Wizards. And we were kind of a family even before we started.
Right.
And basically, I kind of ended up working at Wizards on their recommendation.
Right.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
so you were involved in Camarilla. That was, I believe Camarilla is the organization for role playing.
For the
with
Vampire the Masquerade role-playing organization.
Like
it was
products,
it was
basically,
started here in Seattle, actually, by Matt Burke.
Oh, I
who,
didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Matt Burke, Jana Wright, and a couple of other people started it. And when I joined, they only had like 20 members. I was member 23.
It's because of the rain, right? Is that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, right.
and also a lot because of Wade Racine,
Yeah.
who was an amazing storyteller and still is an amazing storyteller. And so we would go, because he was running these fun games, and we would have meetings where we would go down to the bookstore in the base, or to the cafe in the basement of Elliott Bay Books.
Yeah.
And we would have, they weren't actually live action games at that point. We would just have gatherings for people who were into the game, and you could go in character and you would do a performance.
Right.
So it was really fun. We'd have people doing Shakespeare, we'd have people doing various musical things, and that kind of evolved into having weekly games there.
Right, and then into the Camarilla when
And then-
Vampire the Masquerade came out. So
Right.
you were here then, I believe that happened in 1992, so you were
Oh, yeah.
on the ground floor of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow, okay, that's cool. So how did you make the jump from working on, being involved as a gamer, as a fan, but also involved in the Camarilla, in the World of Darkness stuff, to helping Wizards of the Coast do Magic cards? It seems like a bit of a transition.
It is a little bit of a transition, but it all kind of makes sense.
Okay, help us make sense of it.
So I started working at Wizards when there was that there was a distribution error with Legends,
Magic the Gathering Legends.
with
this
Magic
would
the
have
Gathering Legends.
been
So this was 94.
And I can describe, I think I know which distribution.
I think you know the thing with the rares.
Yes, okay. So, in fact, I think this came up on at least one of our other shows.
Steve's show.
Yeah. So with the Magic the Gathering Legends set, going into the summer of 1994, we had a collation problem at the printers where if you take all the rare cards of that set, any given booster box would only have rare cards from one of those, one half of the set. And in fact, I think that this whole cases. And so a whole shipment of cards might be missing. And no matter how many boosters you bought, you couldn't find any of the rares that were in the other half. So entire communities of players could not get access to those cards.
Could not get access to certain cards.
So how did you fix this?
We did I'm not entirely sure because that was not my problem. I was hired because we had to send out individual rare cards to people that requested them.
But that's the fix, right?
That was how it was fixed, and that was my job was working, just putting a card in an envelope, putting a return sticker on it, getting it to the mailer.
Okay, so a consumer, a gamer, would send you rare cards that were extras of Legends, like if they got duplicates, and you would send them back rare cards from the other half, right?
Yes.
Is that do I have that right?
Yes, I believe that's how it worked.
Yeah.
This was many years ago.
Oh, you're having troubles with memory too. That's why we're doing these shows now, because
Because after a while, it's just going to be, what?
Yeah.
There's a game called Magic?
We're right in the sweet spot between like enough times gone by that we can say things wrong and everybody will forgive us because it's age and we can just make up answers. But we haven't quite gotten to the point where we don't remember anything.
Exactly.
And don't have the imagination to make up answers.
Well, I've been journaling for years, so I did go back on some of my journals and old magazine articles I had written to kind of refresh my memory before I came on. I did my homework.
Good. All right, so you came in to work on that. Well, that job didn't last very long. You must have. What did you find to do after that? After that,
we were WotC was just starting to work on their vampire card game.
Okay.
And I was hired on to do all of the flavor text for those cards, and also.
Now that would have been Jihad.
That
right?
was
Originally
Jihad.
named Jihad.
The J word.
Jihad,
We
yeah.
changed
Which
we
we renamed to Vampire: The Eternal Struggle.
Yes.
Yes.
So we needed a lot of writing done, and we needed someone that was familiar with White Wolf's World of Darkness as well as with trading card games to write various things. Like Introduction to the World of Darkness was a thing that was in every card pack, and I wrote that. So I did a lot of work on those sets. And from there, I moved into the Duelist Convocation, which is now known as the DCI. Is it still the DCI, or
I guess.
has it changed?
I wonder if there's maybe people who don't know what that originally stood for.
So why?
DC stood for Duelist Convocation.
International.
International came later.
Oh, okay.
When I started, there wasn't an international yet.
Right.
It was the very early days.
Yeah.
And that was the organized play. That was organized play. I think it's just called organized play.
For Magic the Gathering.
For Magic the Gathering, yes. And what my job was we were using a scoring system based on the chess scoring system.
Right.
So if you played in a tournament, you got a certain number of points that were applied to your rankings overall. My job was to make sure that every tournament that you could acquire rankings in was an officially sanctioned tournament and wasn't just two guys in their garage.
Right.
Okay.
So how did people go about applying to be a sanctioned tournament?
They would write in. They would send letters. They would do email, although email was in its infancy.
Yeah.
As was I. So
As were we all.
People that wanted sanctioned tournaments we had an address they could write to have a sanctioned tournament. Then I would call them and talk to them and make sure that they met the qualifications, which I know you had to have a certain number of players. You had to have a good space to have it in, like a comic shop or a game store or someplace like that. You couldn't just hold it in your yard. As someone once did.
Yeah, were there ever any complaints about?
There was one where
about inappropriate
there was
venues.
There was a tournament that a guy that had a game store sanctioned, but decided to have the tournament outdoors. And it was apparently in his yard, and people were I got a very angry letter by someone because a chicken had jumped up on the table and messed up his cards. And that is a legitimate complaint, but also kind of a hilarious complaint because, well, that's not something that you see today.
Well, it doesn't specifically say in the rules that you can't have a chicken.
What do you say to that, Rhias?
Well, what we did is we contacted the guy and told him he couldn't have any more sanctioned tournaments.
No more chickens.
No more chicken tournaments. I apologized to the guy. His cards didn't get damaged in any way. They just got kicked around because a chicken ran across the table. So that was good. But yeah, and we would have a few things. Every once in a while, we'd run up against something like that. We usually caught it, and we wouldn't sanction the tournaments. But I was doing the newsletter, and I'm looking back at it. And one of the things in the newsletter we would run every month was a list of all the sanctioned tournaments in the country. And like in those first newsletters, there's like 8. And now Magic is this huge, now it's huge, and there's international tournaments and championships. But back then we had 8 sanctioned tournaments.
Now you said you mentioned the newsletter. That was, what was it called?
It was called the Duelist Companion.
Companion, that's right. Right. And so you worked on that too, didn't you? Did
Yes.
you work on the
Oh yeah,
newsletter?
I was in charge of that. I did all except for the first issue.
And didn't you go by a byline anti-something?
Anti-Badger.
Anti-Badger.
I did kind of a Dave Barry style, a gothic Dave Barry style column that was...
Advice column?
No, it wasn't an advice column. It was the adventures of the Duelist Convocation.
Right.
And it would just have stories about random things that happened at conventions. And
Right.
it was super fun. People loved it. It was a really fun column to write.
So if you're a fan of Anti-Badger,
That's me.
That's some really old school players out there. I bet there is somebody out there who's going to watch this video and go, "Oh, that's Anti-Badger."
And still around.
That's
I was immortalized in the Homelands deck as the Rhiasarian Badger.
oh, okay.
I have a magic card. Woo!
There you go. Nice.
Which is
nice.
pretty fun. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Let's see. Any other stories you can remember about your time at or working on the Duelist Convocation?
Did you have to go to the tournaments and stuff too?
Yeah. A lot of the work was going to tournaments or going to. We would fly to Las Vegas and go to all the game stores to promote the game and to get people to do sanctioned tournaments and give them information. And those were always really fun trips. There were 2 or 3 of us that would go. I think it was me, Steve Bishop, and Corey Smith. And we constantly got asked if we were in a band because Corey's big and scary. And so he looks like a bodyguard. And then Steve was Steve. He's kind of a heavy metal dude.
Yeah.
He had kind of that rock star look, and then I was at my highest of goth phases. And so we kind of looked like a band, and people would always ask us, "Are you guys a band?" And it got worse when we would travel with other Wizards of the Coast goths. So we had an imaginary band called Velvet something.
Velvet Hammer.
It might have been
right?
Velvet Hammer,
Yeah,
unless
yeah.
that's a real band.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had an imaginary band.
Because that's just easier, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was...
Do people start saying, "Hey man, have you seen the new Velvet Hammer release?" People trying to be in, you know?
They're like, "Oh, you guys are my favorite band." I'm like, "Oh, thanks. Here, let me autograph our non-existent record for you."
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, that's our hit single. You're banned from tournament play.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Did you have to actually ban a bunch of people?
I was in charge. Sometimes, yes. Some people did get banned, but I was not in charge of doing that.
But you're
because
talking.
I wasn't the rules person, so Steve Bishop or other people that were working with us were in charge of at tournament behavior. I was just in charge of making sure that the tournaments were.
So you didn't have to get out
legitimate.
the velvet hammer for anybody.
No, they never let me.
Drop the velvet hammer.
Put the hammer down. The velvet hammer.
Yeah.
Okay, any so going to retail stores, going to conventions, Las Vegas. What was that like? You
It was
would.
really fun.
I happen to remember and know that you always dressed like a goth because we had no problem with that.
No, there were-
the wizards. We didn't care how
I
you
have
dressed.
felt like people that are still in my extended chosen family are people I met through Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
All these years later, I still do a family dinner every Friday night, and it's all, tons of it. Most of the people, ex-WotC.
Right. Nice.
And yeah, it's nice. It was a great place to forge lifelong friendships. And I think a lot of the time, if you're sharing a hotel room with people, that's under dubious circumstances.
Dubious circumstances, meaning going
No,
to a convention or
Yeah, going to a convention where you're working really hard all day.
right.
And it kind of builds this family feeling. You take care of each other. You're always, if you're not working the booth, you're checking to make sure people in the booth don't need coffee or,
Basic sustenance.
basic sustenance.
So how do retailers react when a bunch of goths would show up to talk to them about
Well, at that
organizing
point-
magic tournaments?
Well, the vampire role-playing game was pretty big
Right.
at that point already. So it wasn't a problem.
So, you must
They
be the
seemed
White Wolf
really-
people.
No.
Did you ever get that?
No, actually, because of the Are You in a Band columns prepared people for what was going to happen. And everybody that I met that was a retailer or running a tournament were all just really nice people.
So you didn't really
I
have
don't know, they always wanted to take you out to dinner and take you to or show you to where the Liberace Museum was or
That's very important cultural
the
experience.
important cultural experiences.
Well, that's great. That's good. I think there was always a part of me that worried that
that we were
maybe you-
just being jerks to them.
No,
that
that
they-
people
that
might
they-
not might not treat you well.
Especially if you were
for
like,
being goths. And
Well-
I always had a mischievous side of me that
I
kinda,
personally have been gaming since the first iteration of Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm an old school nerd. So of course I'm going to get along with people who have comic book stores and stuff because that's
you can talk to talk.
right.
your
You
people.
talk to them for a few minutes and then suddenly you realize you're all part of the same massive tribe.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't really matter if you look gothic or how you look because they're like, oh, you like that comic book. I like that comic book too. And it's all,
Yeah.
it all works out.
Well, great.
And with Magic, there was so many people. This was the early days. People were so excited about it that it was great to go in and talk to them and to feel like that you were doing good for them.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh yeah, you love this thing? We have this thing.
Yeah.
Here's how you can get more of it. And I loved doing that.
Well, and not just more of it, but also here's more ways you can experience it. You can play in these tournaments, and
Right.
you can do these things, and it'll all be part of something that we can give to you.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And we went to a lot of conventions, as you know.
Yeah.
One time we went to I think it was a Worldcon in Montreal. And that was super fun. I know you were there because you figure in one of the stories.
Winnipeg, maybe.
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg.
Okay,
The Winnipeg event.
Yes.
We went to Winnipeg for a convention, and we were all going to go out somewhere afterwards, and we were kind of looking for a goth club, but we found one bar that we went into, and it was all full of people wearing a lot of plaid. And it was
Like
definitely no, it was a redneck bar.
Oh, okay.
And
All
they
right.
looked at us, and we looked at them, and we decided, no, we're going to go some other place. And Anson was like, oh, there's
Anson
a golf.
Maddox?
Anson Maddox was with
Yeah.
us, and he
One of the original
said-
artists from Magic the Gathering.
he said,
yeah.
oh, I hear there's a goth club a block from here. And so you were with us, and we all went to this goth club, and we paid to get in, and it was fetish night.
Uh-oh.
So now, at least, so now we're in this fetish bar, and there's people in cages, and people running around wearing. There was a guy who was wearing nothing but a fanny pack, and white knee socks, and sandals.
That doesn't
And
seem to
that's
be
when
quite.
you decided to go back to the hotel.
Yes.
So you're just trying to go out for beers, and then
Yeah.
you end up in this fetish club with your coworkers and your boss, and you're like,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
this is happening.
I remember at one point grabbing the nearest WotC employee who happened to be Anson Maddox and just said, "Do not move from my side. You're just I'm."
And we had a beer there. We had a drink, and then you left early,
Yeah.
and wisely, I think.
I might have gone over to the country bar, but no.
You might have gone back to the country bar. I don't know. It's probably your safest option at that point. And then me, Anson, and a couple of the other artists that were with us on that trip walked back to the hotel, and there was a rainstorm. And it wasn't like a normal Seattle rain, which we're all used to. It was when the skies open up. It was like it rained in the Bible. So
Biblical proportion rate.
we're walking, we get back to the hotel, and I look at Anson and the other person that's with us, and they are completely soaked to the skin. And they're like, look, we're just going to go to our room and order a pizza. And I'm like, okay, I am in with that. We get up to the room, and Anson just looks at me and says, "Oh my God, Rhias." And I said, "What?" Because I'm soaking wet. And he's like, "Your hair looks exactly the same." Because I had so much hairspray in it that the biblical amounts of rain never even reached my scalp. We call that the Gothic umbrella effect. And I'm like, oh yeah, and my makeup, my eyeliner ran a little bit because it got wet, but that's kind of a goth look. So I was like, I survived.
You were ready to go back out if you wanted to.
And then we ordered a pizza, and as we were waiting for it, the fire alarm in the hotel went off. And we were on the 26th floor, and you can't take the elevators when the fire alarm goes off. So Anson called the front desk and confirmed that room service was not bringing us a pizza. Which was the most important thing at that point. And then we walked down to the lobby, and there was no fire. It was which was good. I'm glad the hotel did not actually catch fire. But that was that's an experience that I will always remember because it was just so hilarious. Like, we ordered a pizza. Excuse me, the fire alarm is going off. Does this mean we're not getting a pizza? We have our priorities here.
It's interesting how, I don't know if it seems the same in that, I've done a lot of travel for various companies, and a lot of the trips you just have no memory of them. And then there will be the occasional trip where you have multiple memories from the same trip.
Right.
Well, and it's usually one where stuff went wrong.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was the first trip I went to Tokyo. First time I went to Japan, and I've often thought, like, oh, if I ever wrote a book about my time at Wizards, I think I would just call it 5 Days in Tokyo, and I would write
because everything was amazing and new.
I would just write about this crazy trip to Tokyo, and then you would cover a lot of history to kind of support
the crazy trip in Tokyo.
The information you need to fully appreciate all the things that happened in that crazy trip.
Yeah, and I really liked being sent to different conventions around the country because if you just live in one area and you just go to the conventions there, you kind of think that's what a convention is like. But then, like, I went to this gaming convention in New Jersey called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was done by a guy
ShoreCon?
No, it was a guy named Vinny Salzillo ran it.
Okay.
And it was just a gaming convention, and it wasn't just role-playing or card games. It was everything. They had a Scrabble championship there. And but what I loved about it was instead of having a hospitality suite, they had people with food carts that would go through the gaming rooms. so you didn't have to leave your table. They would just have like people
Like
bringing
dim
hot
sum
dogs.
carts?
Like dim sum carts.
Some-
And it
man.
was,
That's
and,
a Gen
and
Con
Let's do
idea
that at
for
Gen
sure.
Con.
Let's do it.
Dim sum
it
carts.
was a
Yeah.
great idea because it really kept people that were gaming. You know, you get like hungry or thirsty when you're gaming and you have to stop. And if it's a role playing thing, then you miss part of the adventure. And it was just, I thought it was this amazing idea.
Totally.
And they also did this crazy thing called sugar madness, where they would buy, they would take a small meeting room and they would buy a truckload of candy. A truckload, and then they would just throw the doors open and let people go crazy. It was knee deep in pixie sticks,
Oh God.
and then like it would be the only quiet night of the convention because everybody had crashed from their sugar high earlier in the day. So there were no parties in the rooms because everybody
Right.
was just unconscious from sugar,
Oh my gosh.
and that was a really fun convention. It's one of my favorites.
So we talked earlier about I asked you like how people treated you, you and some of your travel mates as goths. But what did it feel like to you to be a Wizards of the Coast employee in Magic the Gathering?
It was awesome. It was great because we had this game and it was universally loved. And that is so nice. I've done conventions where you're introducing like newer games or smaller games, but it's so nice when you go into a convention and people are excited about you and excited about the product. And I loved that. The enthusiasm was great.
Did you get treated like a celebrity of some sense?
Occasionally.
Yeah. I've talked to other people who worked at Wizards in the early days, like we did, who liked to, say it was so crazy to be treated like a celebrity, like people asking for autographs and stuff
Oh
like
yeah,
that. And
I have autographed Magic cards, and I feel bad because now that's worth nothing. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, maybe it's worth more because those are the really rare ones.
The super rare ones. This is signed by some person who once worked at Wizards of the Coast. I wouldn't sign rares.
Yeah.
That was my thing. I'm like, I'll sign your card, but I'll sign a land or something because you want to get the artist to sign that Black Lotus. You really do.
So I want to back up a little bit then because we're talking about, how you get treated, and especially the goth thing. When we had Scaff, Elias, and Jim Lynn on the show, one of the questions we asked them was what was their first impression of Wizards when they, first came to the office and started working there. And both of them said, well, the first thing I saw was a bunch of goths hiding from the sun. And that's how we knew we weren't in Philadelphia anymore. And Scaff, I think, told us a story of they had a moving van with them that had all their stuff in it, and he tried to move it, and there were actually goths under the van.
That is not true.
Okay, that is what I wanted to find out.
We weren't hiding from the sun that much. We lived in Seattle. There's not much sun to hide from.
Okay. I was just, because that sounded weird to me,
No.
I thought I would double check.
We did one time set a toaster on fire.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Remember that? We
Oh,
got
yeah.
permission from
Yeah.
Mr. Bob, who was our facilities manager, because we had read on the internet that if you leave a strawberry Pop-Tart in the toaster too long, it will turn into a giant fireball. So Brian Campbell brought in
Yes.
an old toaster, and we
He
were
was one
allowed.
of the editors, by the way.
And we
Yes.
cleared it with everyone, and we took it out in the parking lot on a very long extension cord.
Yeah.
And we had somebody standing by with a fire thing. Because apparently when we asked permission, they thought we were going to do this at our desk. Like, we're going to try this thing to see if it bursts into flame. We're going to do it right here on our desk. No.
Silly operations
So we-
manager.
So we ended up, and it was like all the goths too, standing in the parking lot, surrounding and staring at a toaster for like 10 minutes until it finally caught fire.
If I recall correctly, Brian also did another experiment with one of there was like a Barbie that had roller skates that if you skated it across, it would shoot sparks
It
out
would
the
shoot
back
sparks, and he was trying to catch things on fire.
And he was trying to see if he could catch things on fire with that.
Yeah,
too.
it was like a rollerblade Barbie
Yeah,
or
rollerblade
something, and
Barbie,
it
I
had
think.
like, it would do sparks.
Yeah, and there was some effort to goth it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure that we put some black clothes on it because Barbie needs all the help she can
Well,
get.
and she had some painted on eyebrows and things.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh
I had
gosh.
completely forgotten about that. In a lot of ways, I mean, we got a lot of work done, and we really, we got a lot of work done. We really did. But at the same time, there was kind of a Wild West feel to it because it was this small company back then, and we were we had this game that had just taken off. And yeah, it was very much, other offices I've worked in have not been as Wild West as that.
So I'm going to go back to conventions. You attended
Okay.
a bunch of conventions. I heard product trades. I heard that one of the things that a lot of early WotC people did. Well, I'll test. Actually, when I got into the industry, in early Gen Cons, back in the days when the industry was really small, and there weren't a lot of people, there weren't a lot of
Right, there
companies, and there weren't a lot of people. One of the things that we would do, especially on Sundays when we kind of had an idea of which inventory we had left over, is that we would go around and trade product from our company with other people and their company, and
Right.
and it was just like okay, it was part of the thing
Because
everybody
and it's
did.
Sunday, and there's stuff we didn't want to ship home, and there was stuff they didn't want to ship home. So
Right.
it was this huge schmooze fest.
Yeah, it kind of a perk for people to be
Absolutely.
able to tap
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
company inventory and give it
Sometimes
away.
you would have to buy a new suitcase.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, back in the early days, we used to do that. I have stage props that were given to me by Guar in exchange for booster packs.
Guar?
Guar love Magic.
Aren't they like a heavy metal fantasy band?
They're a crazy. They are what they are. They wear a lot of giant.
Nevertheless,
they
we
wear a
must
lot
try
of
to explain
giant
it.
foam costumes. They are definitely not PG rated. The
Okay.
costumes. Sometimes bodily fluids spray out of the costumes onto the audience.
You mean sweat? Okay, got it.
Yeah, I mean sweat.
Okay, so you traded magic
So
cards.
we traded magic
for,
cards. I have like some stuff they gave me, like a skull plaque and some various
a
things.
skull plaque.
They had a booth at Dragon Con,
Okay,
and that was super fun, and they were really nice.
and so they were Magic fans.
They were huge Magic fans.
Oh yeah.
A lot of touring bands were Magic fans. I believe My Chemical Romance may have played a lot of Magic, and that's because you're in a small space with your friends and you need a portable game. Magic is
Right.
great to play on a tour bus or
Right.
in a small environment.
Right.
So I think a lot of bands that I've heard of played Magic.
Right.
Bands I've heard of played it.
Yeah, there you go.
Including Velvet Hammer.
So
Including Velvet
Hammer. Yeah.
Yes. So this might go back to the Winnipeg story. I'm not quite sure. I heard there was once an issue with a border crossing.
Well, yes, and that was not my fault. I'm gonna.
Let's just get that clear up front.
We were going to Canada, and we had all of our stuff, and of course, we always dressed up for flights because we dressed up for everything. Because why wouldn't you? And we're trying to get on the plane, and customs calls us over and asks if we're in a band and if we're bringing records or anything to sell. And Sean Carnes opens his big mouth and says, "No, we're going up to do some demonstrations," which immediately makes them think we're some kind of political dissidents. And so it took us a couple of hours to get into Canada because we got pulled aside and we got questioned. It was
Yeah,
it
we
was
had
a
to
mess.
teach Sean the difference between a demonstration and a demo.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
So Sean
that was
Collins,
our-
by the way, was worked on the Magic. Did he work in customer service before? He
Yeah.
Sean Carnes was
Yeah.
in customer service
Customer
for a long
service, yeah,
time.
yeah,
He was also
yeah.
known as Captain Volume.
Captain Volume. Yes.
We've heard of this individual before.
Yes.
He's
yes.
great.
We would love
I
to
think
get
he
Sean.
came up in Polk.
He
Yes.
is great. He's
So, yeah.
I think he's doing World Series of Poker now.
Yeah,
I think
he
that's
is.
what he's into.
Oh, I remember a story that, let's see if this one's true. Something about when you were in customer service, somebody called in
Oh,
with a
the
question
thing.
about
The
Chaos Orb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
What was-
I wasn't in customer service very long, and this is one of the reasons. Someone called in and said, okay, I'm going to a tournament and I want to make sure, and I want to know if I can do this. I want to bring a piece of plexiglass that I can lay over my cards so that if someone flips a Chaos Orb, it's nullified because it doesn't land on any of my cards, it lands on the plexiglass. And my answer was, no, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And apparently, as I've learned in other customer service jobs over the year, first off, it was not the dumbest thing I would ever hear. And secondly, you should never say that.
Even if it's true.
Even if it was true. And obviously, no, you can't do that. Why would you even why would you put that call in? Is that not common sense?
I know. Oh,
That's too
gosh.
funny.
Yeah.
Can you think of any other?
This was before people were putting, in that case, no, card sleeves would completely make your cards unplayable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's not like Chaos Orbs were like super common either in terms
No.
of showing up in tournament play.
No. But the fact that they felt they needed to call and ask was
I
just
know.
hilarious to me.
And from that day, we no longer worked customer service.
And from that day, I was moved on to the newsletter team where we did the company newsletter, we did the Duelist Convocation newsletter,
Where anything you said could be edited.
where Beverly would look at the things I had written and said, okay, this is all right, this is fine.
So you've commented a little bit about how special the relationships that you forged at Wizards, the type of company it was in the early days.
Oh, yeah.
I think kind of related to that was the interview process of.
The interview process, yeah, it was very different from what a normal interview process is. It was super fun, but this was before we had an HR person. So
And you
if
could
you're
tell.
being interviewed, often if you were interviewing for customer service or the Duelist Convocation, you would have to stand against a wall and prove that you could stand to be hit with weapon fire from Nerf guns. Your reaction to being shot with a Nerf weapon was taken into consideration. Also, you had to know a lot of movie quotes. One of our standard interview questions was, why should you nuke them from orbit? Because it's the only way to be sure.
Right.
So there was a lot of that. No one was ever denied a job on the basis of their answers to any of those questions. So if you
That's
didn't
our
know why
story,
you
and we're sticking to it.
oh, it's true.
Yeah.
But
Most
I mean,
of the
this
people,
is
we had
just-
a lot of great people that got jobs there. And
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the sort of thing that these days you would just call it a cultural fit
right.
question, right? I mean, that's sort of the HR word for.
Yes, I think we called it corporate culture questions, but I'm not sure what we called shooting people with Nerf weapons other than good,
That
clean,
was also pretty
good,
much
clean
corporate
fun.
culture. I mean, seriously though, because there were enough Nerf fights going on that
Oh,
you
yeah.
had to be able to continue working while under fire.
Yes. If you have a deadline, it does not matter if Kyle comes over and starts shooting it with a Nerf gun.
Well, and editing was next to R&D, so a lot of times
Oh.
people would shoot at R&D and we would be just sort of collateral.
Yeah.
Caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
And you had to be able to just get on with that.
Right. Right.
It's like, okay, fine.
Yes, yes, and it also sometimes reached my area where I was sitting. Sometimes people would
Sometimes
come
you'd
in
just
and
be sitting at your desk
decide,
and an
you know,
arrow would come in.
Sometimes somebody would think, wouldn't it be fun to go fire a new Nerf weapon at the CEO? Sure, yeah. I mean, you could see where somebody might get a crazy idea like that. Yeah,
Not me.
yeah.
Certainly
I
not because
only
the
shot
CEO
my
ever fired on
underlings.
them.
Yes, well, sometimes.
Rhias, do you think that the community and the culture built around the company really helped folks be creative with their work and like helped Magic be the way it is today?
I think so.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people who were, including me, who had read and loved high fantasy novels.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up on Fritz Leiber, Michael Moorcock, all that stuff. And Magic was a really fun way to coalesce that and make yourself part of the story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that having a lot of creative people that really knew the genre was hugely helpful.
And the fact that you could have fun too is probably a lot nicer for creativity and,
Yeah.
making things.
Yeah.
Well, people were working such long hours.
Yeah, we
all
worked
the time.
We worked really hard.
That it was in some ways almost necessary to be able to have those little.
Right, because like at the beginning we were a small company when I started with like maybe 25 people, and we had what had just become one of the most popular games ever. And there was a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of hats that had to be worn, I bet.
Yeah.
And it was all hours of the night. I remember one story when I was down at the office at like 2:00 in the morning, and and somehow I knew that Scaff was also in the office.
Because
but he
Scaff was
wasn't-
always
He was
there.
always there. He slept usually there, and he wasn't anywhere near me. And so we started having a conversation back and forth by using the all-page system on the phone.
Oh, God.
The
Might
phone,
as well.
The phone system had a phone. You just press, speaker, and it would go throughout the entire office complex. And, and I don't know who started it, probably him because he's more creative. And we just went back and forth. And eventually, somebody else got on the all-page system. Would you guys quit talking? I'm trying to work here.
Sorry, we didn't know. Yeah, there were a lot of late shifts. I never had to do an all-nighter, but I know lots of people did.
Yeah.
Especially
yeah.
when you're getting close to deadlines and you have to ship the films on this date, and everything has to be done by this date.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
the tournament is going to be on this day, and if you're not ready to have it, then
Yeah.
that's bad.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like working Gen Con, you announce the date of the show. I love that aspect of
Oh, yeah, you're set up.
of show management or going on tours and stuff. The dates never change.
Right. You're
It's
just
like-
working toward that date, and it's.
Yeah.
I like that too. I like having set deadlines
Yeah.
because then I know how much I have to have done a week out or 2 days out,
Right.
and it makes it a lot easier for me than just having some nebulous goal.
Yeah. So you mentioned that I was talking about interviews earlier. You mentioned that there were some interesting interview candidates over the years.
Well, we did have a person who for their interview came in their Star Trek uniform. And
For their interview.
for their first job interview, and I know that we are famous for hiring nerds, but you kind of want to ease into it. You ease in. You come in your interview clothes the first time, and as you read the room and get to know more people, then you can start wearing your Star Trek uniform. Maybe start with the pants, wear those for like a month or so, get people used to it. Showing up in full regalia, in full cosplay regalia for your first interview seems really daring to me.
Yeah. So he or she did not get hired.
I don't believe they got hired.
No.
No.
Okay. Right.
Very
right.
bold.
We had a resume once from someone who stated that they would be good at working for us because they were in a BDSM relationship where they were the bottom and they were used to taking orders.
Wow.
That's not a thing you put on your resume. That is more information than anyone needs. They did not get hired. Who knows what they would have worn to the job interview?
We can only imagine.
It might have been that guy from
Probably-
Canada.
probably shouldn't.
Might have been that guy with the fanny pack and the long socks from Canada.
You gotta say though, it wasn't always a disqualifying thing, because I had an interview.
no.
There was one of my editors
Yes.
who came and interviewed, and one of our standard questions was, do you have any hobbies that are relevant to the job? Because we thought, if people, because
Sure. Like if you're in a gaming club. Or
yeah, exactly.
Right.
And he said, well, I can't, I don't think so unless you count my fetish for schoolgirl skirts.
Wow.
And I
I'm
know
like,
who said that. And I'm not going to say any
really,
names.
really
yes.
don't want to know how you think that is related to
That
your
is, I don't think that is job related, but maybe we won't send you to the anime convention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
It's like, it is a good thing your editing test was really, really excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But yeah, it didn't always disqualify people, but sometimes it was just so blatant, and and I'm like, well, I know that we dress like weirdos, but
You have to show you're capable
you have to show you're capable
of
fitting in with normal people. You don't necessarily have to do it. You just have to show you're capable of it. I think that goes for any job interview.
Well, and this sort of gets to, I know one of the other things that you and I worked on together was when Wizards had discovered that it needed to have an employee handbook.
Oh, and we had to write a dress code.
Yes, and you were one of the people that got to help write the dress code, and that was extra fun because we were basing it on things that had actually
Do
occurred.
you remember any highlights from the?
I remember if you are wearing wings, they have to fit in your cubicle.
Right. You cannot have wings that are, and I think that may have come from Theater Magic when we had that giant Sarah Angel costume.
Yeah, you can't wear the Sarah Angel costume in your cubicle if it would, actually stick out and hit other people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that seems
it's
reasonable.
common. Yeah, like I feel like that's a good piece of advice.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, it almost seems odd that it had to be written down though.
It did though.
It did though.
It did though.
And there was also you can't wear anything that would be illegal.
Right. You can't.
Because that was you have to wear shoes in the bathroom rule.
Oh, shoes in the bathroom. Yeah, we had like 2 or 3 people that did not like to wear shoes.
Yeah. I remember Scaff and Vince having a conversation in the next 2 urinals once, and Vince was saying, "I can't understand why you would come in here without shoes on." And Scaff was saying, "You just gotta be careful where you step."
Gross.
Oh dear, no.
Yeah.
Brian Campbell was another one who didn't really like to wear shoes. And he ended up having this set of communal slippers that he would station outside the men's room, and then he would put them on
when he went in,
and then take them off as soon as he left out, and then other guys, maybe even Scaff, I don't know.
It makes you wonder how many things in an employee handbook arise because there was this one time where somebody did this, and so I guess we better mention it.
Well, that's kind of how customer service works. Now we have to mention that you can't put a piece of plexiglass on the table to avoid the chaos.
Right.
And now we have to say that you can't call a customer dumb. Darn it.
True.
Yeah.
Also, chickens.
Also chickens.
Yeah, no
chickens-
chickens at your tournament.
Live chickens are officially banned from tournament play.
Yes.
Also chickens, indeed.
Including as prizes.
Rhias,
Yeah.
do you have any stories from First Worlds?
What's that?
The First Worlds?
Oh, the first World Championship of
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering? Okay.
I did a lot of work on the First Worlds because Duelist Convocation. It was at a Gen Con. I don't think we had I seem to remember the room we were in was almost a hallway. It was small. And there were no seats, so people were just standing around watching the final match.
Wow.
I had I had a video camera, a VHS video camera, and I had to stand on the table and focus in so that we would have a record of the gameplay. Wow. Yeah.
Nice.
It's really fun to look back on photos of that. Yeah. I know there's some on the magic.com website somewhere. It's really fun to look at photos of that and then on photos of what is happening now, where there's TV screens and you can see what's happening and people are sitting in chairs. But yeah.
The technology, people in chairs now.
I also had the trophy built for the first. I was in charge of getting the trophy designed for the First Worlds.
Nice.
I still have a spare nameplate from it that says Magic the Gathering First World Championship because I needed a sample of a font to take back and show to people. So I still have that somewhere in my house.
That's cool.
I'm not sure where.
What was the trophy? Do you remember? Or-
It was just a big trophy shop trophy.
Right. Okay.
It was-
right. It wasn't a badger or.
It wasn't. No, it was just a standard
Dead
trophy
cat
like
or
you would get
something.
for a bowling tournament. You know, like you get for a
probably
car
did
show or a bowling tournament.
Probably
It was
didn't have a
nice
bowler
trophy.
on top though.
No, no.
Well, I mentioned the dead cat because when I told Steve Connor you were coming onto the show, I said, "You remember Rhias, don't you?" And he goes, "Yeah, isn't she the girl that had the dead cat on her desk?"
I never had a dead cat on my desk.
Okay, so sorry,
That was
Steve.
Wendy Lewis, who worked in conventions.
Okay.
It was her dead cat. She was my roommate, so usually that dead cat was on the wall in my house. She is a rogue taxidermist.
Oh, okay. It was proper then.
I'm sorry.
So there was a lot of strange things on our walls. We've always had kind of an Addams Family aesthetic.
Just hold on. A rogue taxidermist.
Rogue taxidermist.
Okay.
Those are people who put together things that maybe shouldn't be put together.
Oh,
You know,
I
you get
see.
your Fiji mermaids or your jackalopes, that kind of stuff, except often more extreme.
Wow. Vigilante taxidermist, indeed.
Right.
Okay then.
Taxidermist. Yeah.
Yeah, vigilante taxidermist house.
Right.
So that dead cat was on our wall for a long time that we lived together.
Well, I will be sure
And,
and set Steve straight
Not
on,
my cat.
on that. Right.
I had
Did
a lot
you-
of animal skulls on my desk.
I was just going to say, you had to have
No,
something.
I have a
and-
good collection of animal skulls that are like from various sellers and stuff.
Right.
I may have had some human bones on my desk at some point.
Okay. There we go.
I got them at a place called Maxilla and Mandible Company in New York. And when I shattered my elbow, which also a WotC experience,
Was it inline skating?
it was inline skating.
Yeah, I remember. It
Yeah.
it looked very painful.
It was very painful.
Yeah.
But
Yes. Yeah. Well, buying human bones from someplace in New York
Yeah.
reminds me of the
there
first.
was a licensed place. They're not. I didn't dig them up. Is what I'm saying.
It reminds me of the first time that I went to Philadelphia. We went there. Lisa Stevens and Jesper Meerforce and I went there to see Richard Garfield and all the early East Coast playtesters.
You went to the Muter Museum, didn't
and
you?
yes, and so I asked Jesper, "Hey, do you want to go to Philadelphia?" And without missing a beat, he said, "Yes, I've never been to the Muter Museum, and I always wanted to go." And I'm like, "The Muter Museum? What's that?" And he goes, "It's a museum of medical oddities. I've always wanted to see their display of skin disease."
Yeah.
And like, okay, thank you. Yeah.
He and Anson had this total thing for skin disease.
Yeah, because Anson used to have skin disease textbooks at his
Yeah.
desk all the time.
Well, and you
It was a
remember,
thing.
you remember that Dave Howell's cat had some kind
not
of
the same cat, is it?
No. Dave Howell's cat was still alive at
Oh,
this
okay.
point, and he had some kind of rash or burn or something all over his stomach.
Oh,
and
poor kitty.
and so Dave was bringing him to work to take care of him and stuff. And Anson's like, "Can I scan that?"
On the copier?
Oh boy.
Oh, gosh.
And there was this whole discussion about whether or not it would be bad for the copier to do this, but nobody asked, is it going to be bad for the cat?
Well, if the cat is laying down and is happy, then it's not going to bother it. But yeah,
Just
Well,
have
they
him
have
lay
to
down.
like put the little hood down and press him like a
Lay him
panini.
down there. Do we have any more questions from our viewers, Kristen?
I think we have possibly scared them all off
Have we
now.
scared them all off?
so it was not my dead cat. I was not the only one with dead things on my desk.
Well, and this is where, the creativity and the
Yes.
core of Magic the Gathering
Yes.
came out, right?
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
that's a big
because
part of it.
I don't think you can get that much creativity out of not having any diversity. And so
Yeah.
I think it's important, right, that Peter, you created such a diverse company, right? Mm-hmm.
and I think that-
did you feel the diversity was important?
I did. I felt like the diversity made the world building better. Because everybody was kind of into science fiction, fantasy genre. We had all read a lot of different books. And so there were a lot of really great ideas flying around for cards, not just card functions, but card names and backstories. And so, yeah, I really liked the world building aspect of it.
You were giving me the motion. Did you have another
I wanted
question
to make sure
or follow-up?
before we're done that you get a chance to tell us about stuff that you're doing now, because I know you have a podcast.
Yes.
I'm doing 2 podcasts currently.
Yeah.
One of them is on hiatus. The one that's on hiatus is called The Night Library. And it's me and another Wizards employee named Jillian Venters.
Perky
And
Goth, right?
Perky Goth. Jilly the Perky Goth.
Yes.
She also runs Gothic Charm School, which is kind of it's like an advice column for goths. It's really
Miss Manners
good.
for Goths, yeah.
It's Miss Manners for Goths. But we do a podcast called The Night Library where we will read horror novels from the 80s and 90s, like the big thick ones with the foil covers that are incredibly lurid and trashy.
Great.
And we read those and then we discuss them. It was inspired by a book called Paperbacks from Hell by a guy named Grady Hendrix. And so we do that, and then I'm on a second podcast which I co-host called Don't Read the Latin. And that is just me and another woman and then sometimes guests, and we just talk about horror films. We're doing horror films from Spain and Latin America for our next podcast, so we're all watching a lot of interesting stuff. So yeah, those are my other projects. As I said, Night Library is currently been on hiatus for a few months because of website issues, but it'll be back.
All right. Well, thank you, Rhias.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming down
This was
here,
super fun.
hanging out with us.
I
It
got
was
to
super
exercise
fun.
my memory and also some demons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you have it, another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison. Thank you for joining us today. And I want to thank my co-host, of course, Beverly Marshall Sailing, for being here with me. And also Gen Con TV for being our host, and also the Chaldea Studios, which is where we're filming. This is not, this is a set. We make films. It's fun stuff.
It's not a real castle.
It's not a real castle. And our guest, Rhias Hall, thank you. And our producer, Kristen Jensen, Will is back there doing all the tech stuff. And we will be back next week on Wednesday at noon. And our guest next week will be Carol Monahan.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I love Carol.
Yeah, love Carol. So can't wait to hear her story. She worked in a lot of sales, logistics. She has interesting stories about distributors and retailers and organizers, I'm sure. So in between now and then, if you on Fridays at 11 a.m. we do table takes, and Mondays at 5 p.m. we have the Brothers Murph. So join us for those shows if you get a chance, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.